Hello and welcome. My name is George, and my channel is all about helping you get the most out of Logic Pro so that you can record and produce your best music in your home studio. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive in the new Logic Pro 12 Synth Keyboard Session Musician. We're going to go over all the parameters and settings so that you can tweak the sound to exactly how you want it for your track. So let's dive in. Okay, so for starters, I played in some chords up here on the piano, and that just sounds like this. And I'd previously done this for my last video, which was on the bass synth players. So if you're interested in that, please check that out. But the main thing for doing this was to get the chords up in the chord track. So if you click on the global tracks and under chords, you'll see these chords are there. And just to quickly show you, I'll just delete these chords up here. And to get them back, all you got to do is grab your region that you recorded and drag it up. And you'll see it says drag here to analyze region chord. And there you go. Then that's up in your chord track. And now your session musicians have something to follow. If you did want to generate a chord progression without playing it in, you could simply right click up here and you could go to chord progressions. And then there's some different presets that you can try here. And we can drag that, and there you go. So that's another way you could get started as well. So let's minimize this. And as I mentioned, this is my bass track here. So I'm going to leave that muted for now. And we'll go over here to the plus button to create a new track. And under the session player, keyboard player, at the top here, we have synth, and at the bottom, we have our piano. So we're going to be focusing on the synths today. So Simple Pad, this is one that was in Logic Pro 11 already. And the Modulated pad and Rhythmic pad, these are the two that were added in Logic Pro 12. I'll quickly load up the Simple Pad to start. And right out of the box, this just sounds like this. So just held chords on the synth. Now you notice with the Simple Pad, there's no patterns or other details tabs or things like that. So we just have the parameters on this first page. So I'm just going to skip over to the Modulated pad because this main page is very much the same, but we have all these different tabs added together. And I'll just play this off the bat so you can hear how that changes from the Simple Pad. So the chords are the same, but now we get this movement, and that's from the envelope and LFO that you can see right there. And if you listen again while visually looking, you'll kind of hear what's happening. So that's the filter opening and closing. So before we get deep into the filter and all that, let's check out the main page a little bit. And this will largely be the same for all three synths. So first off, we have these little hands here, and that gives us our left hand and our right hand. So you see if we click on those, now we have no notes in here. And the left hand will just have two. And if we add in the right hand, well, now we have a whole stacked chords with, at the moment, 3, 6, 8 notes. And then below that, here we have the range. So we bring this up. You'll see those right hand notes get higher. And the left hand notes, we can make those lower if we want. Or we can adjust the range and bring everything closer together. And then below that, then we can control what's being played in the left hand and the right hand. So, for example, for the left hand, we have root only, root and octave, root fifth octave. So when we're talking about the root, we're talking about the bass note. So in this case, for the F minor 7th, F is going to be the root note. For G minor, G is going to be the root note. C minor, C is going to be the root note, and so on. So if you just want that bass note, then you can set it to root only or root and octave. So that's going to be, in the case of the first chord, an F and then another F, an octave above it. And if we're talking about the fifth, well, if we're starting on an F, the fifth is going to be a C. If we're an F minor, the first note is going to be F, second note is going to be G, third note will be A flat, fourth note B flat, and the fifth note will be C. I'm going to set this to just root and octave. And then in the right hand, you can choose, we just want one note. So that would probably be all roots, 2 notes, 3 notes, full chords, stacked, and so on and so on. I'm going to choose full chord here. And then the last pull down menu here, tied notes, currently set to off. So this is if there's any notes that are the same from one chord to the next, you can have that to sustain throughout. So if you notice here, everything is separated from chord to chord, right? And if I select right hand, now this note is getting held over those 2 chords. So in a G minor chord, we have a G, a B flat, and a D. And in a C minor chord, we have a C, E flat, and G. So they both share that G note. So that's what's being held throughout here. But if you want it to reset for every chord, then you can leave that off. And you can do the same with the left hand or right hand and left hand. In this case, there's no shared notes between the left hand, so that's not going to change anything. And then we have note start. So this will either push or pull where the note starts. So if we zoom in a little bit more, you can see right now the note starts right on the beat. If I push that there, then it's going to delay it a bit, or in the opposite direction, it'll start it a little bit early. And then note length. So right now the length is the full chord. We make this shorter. It'll stop a bit early. We make it longer, then it'll kind of bleed into the next chord. And then swing, since these are kind of, the notes themselves are held, so you can't really swing a note that's held the whole time, but the swing is actually affecting the envelope and filter. So if you look here, you can see those get displaced. So if you have a swung beat, then you can swing the filter as well. Now let's move on to the Details tab. So in the Details tab, we have this strum feature. So if you think about a guitar strumming, they're not hitting all the notes directly at once, right? It's more one at a time. And you can create that effect as well. You can see here, the notes getting kind of delayed one at a time. If I turn the envelope amount down to off, you'll hear that a bit more clearly. And then velocity, so this affects kind of the loudness of the notes. You can visually see that as well when I bring this down or up. And then phrase variation, this is going to affect the envelope. So let's bring this amount up a little bit. And I'll talk a little bit more about the envelope in a second, but just so you can visually see. So here, this is where the filter is opening and closing. And if we bring this variation up, and you can see how we're getting some different variations happening there. So that's just introducing more variation to the rhythm of the envelope here. Now, humanize, this is going to affect both the notes and the envelope. So this is just going to shift the notes a little bit more. So if you look at starting with the notes, see how those get displaced a little bit. And same with the filter as well. So that's just if you don't want everything rhythmically super precise, you can add a little bit of humanize in there and just kind of it'll vary where the notes are placed a little bit. And then for tempo, generally automatic is fine, but if you want to kind of double things up, you can go to double time and you can see that the filter gets doubled, so twice the amount of movement in one bar, or half time, then that gets spread out over 2 bars. And then standard and automatic in this case are the same thing. Okay, now let's jump over to envelope. And I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit between the envelope and the LFO because they're very tightly related here. So for starters, here we have envelope complexity and amount, which we haven't really talked about yet. And if I bring the amount all the way down, now you see how this line is basically just kind of a triangle now. And if I bring this up, then that changes that shape quite a bit. So what we're seeing right now is the LFO. And without this envelope, the LFO is untouched. So actually, let's go jump to the LFO for a second. And so now you can see the shape of that LFO. And if I change this to a sine wave, for example, then you can see how that shifts there, and a square wave, and then random. So let's bring this down to 0. So you can see kind of this perfect wave here. And you can hear how that filter is kind of opening and closing based on this. And we can bring that amount up to make it more drastic. And then we also have phase. So this we can change to just where that starts and stops. So this is affecting the cutoff filter in this case in Alchemy. So basically this is going up and down with these ramps here. And if we bring this amount all the way down, now you can hear how the sound doesn't change. It's not modulating. Whereas now it's getting basically from lower to brighter based on these ramp ups. And the other options we have here are the rate. So again, if you want kind of a more rise and fall within the chord, you can add that. Or just kind of the one long one, you can do that. And you can set how it syncs. So right now it syncs to the chords. We do free, for example. And you see now it doesn't reset. Like if we go back to chords here, then it resets at the beginning of every chord instead of when we have it set to free. So I'm going to go back to chord and set the rate back to 1. Now let's go back to the envelope and see how that affects the LFO. So now when I add the envelope back in, this is going to add variations to this LFO that we have. So right now we just have a nice smooth sine wave. If I add this envelope back in, then you see how that modulates the sine wave, and that's going to add kind of this rhythmic variations. And we can adjust the complexity. So if we want kind of less of that or more, you can do that, and kind of the amount that it's varying. So we could just do, these little kind of bumps here and there, or make it a bit more drastic. And then the rhythm of these kind of accents, those are controlled here by this pattern. So we can change the patterns. And you can also set a manual pattern. So that's the last tab here, the manual tab. So this is a little bit different than the other session musicians, whereas in the other session musicians, the pattern actually controls what's being played, or the rhythm of what's being played. And here, the pattern's actually for the envelope. So for example, if I just add a note on beat 2, then you can see now the change is only happening on beat 2. So that's pretty cool. So let's go back to envelope once again. And maybe I'll just go back to pattern number 1. And then we have some other controls to shape this even more. And that's the attack, hold, and decay down here. So if we bring this attack to be longer, then you see the ramp here is longer to that peak. Whereas I bring this, then it's a very more sharp. And then we can also, the decay, so the ramp down. So here, right? If I want a more gradual ramp down. And then the hold, so that's at the peak, how long it holds that peak. Kind of like the shorter one. And then we have this shift start. So that, again, just kind of delays where these peaks start, or have them happening sooner as well. And now this invert. So now instead of these kind of accents happening, it'll be the reverse. Now it's going to be ducking. I prefer the original way. So that's a modulated pad. Now let's check out the rhythmic chords. So you could change it simply from here and go to rhythmic chords, but why don't we just create a new track in case we ever want to go back. So go up here and let's go to rhythmic chords. And that sounds like this straight out of the box. So in the main tab, all these settings are the same as the modulated pad that we just looked at. The few differences, so fill amount, so this will just add in some variation kind of at the end of the phrases. And then we have fill complexity. So let's adjust that a bit. If we were to bring these all the way down, then the chord would just kind of stay constant throughout. Right? And with the fill amount up, you can hear the chord changing different inversions. Didn't seem to actually change until we got above kind of 65%. And then swing. So this will be actually shifting the notes rather than the envelope like in the previous synth. Right? So I'm going to turn that off so that we don't have any swing. And then the complexity and intensity. So this, again, now we're dealing with the actual notes being played, not the envelope anymore. So intensity, that'll be kind of volume. So we bring that down, notes be played quieter. And you can hear them getting louder at the end. And again, that's the LFO here. So you see as it ramps up, it's opening up. So it's naturally getting louder there. But we turn that off for now. Then all the notes are quieter. If we bring the intensity up, then all the notes will be louder. And then complexity. So we want, this will kind of just add more notes or less notes. Kind of like it there. So that's the main page. Now let's move on to details. And again, this is a little bit different than the previous synth. So there's some different phrasing options: accentuated 1, 2, 3, 4. So it just changes kind of the lengths of the notes in certain spots. And then there's an overall note length. So if you want all the notes a little bit longer or shorter, we can do that. And then we also had this strum, which is the same as in the previous pad. And leave that off in this case. And then phrase variations. So if you want more fills, or rather variations of those fills, and more variations in the rhythm, you can do that. So again, that'll just add some more variations throughout. I'm going to put those at 0, just to keep it kind of liked it a bit more constant. And then the feel, pull and push. So again, this will change where the notes are placed. So we push, let's zoom in a bit. Then see the notes are a little bit ahead of the beat. And then pull, they'll be a little bit later. And then humanize, again, this will shift things. So you see how they're not all lined up anymore. Just makes it a little bit looser, but more of a humanized performance, if you will. And then dynamics, so this will affect kind of the range of the volume of the notes. So now the LFO, this is the same as the modulated pad. The only thing is we don't have that envelope to change the LFO. So again, you hear how that gets brighter as that comes on. And again, we can change the shape. So we want kind of that more sine wave. And then manual, in this case, this will be the rhythm of the actual chords. So you can come up with your own patterns there. Let's actually go back, change that back to the first one we had. So that's all the controls for the Rhythmic Chords player. Now, one last thing I'll show is when you load up these session musicians, by default, they're using Alchemy. So if you want to change the sound further, well, of course, you can change the patches in Alchemy. And one of the easiest ways is to change this Perform tab. That's a quick and easy way to change the sound. Or of course, you can change, the preset to something else, Let's marching forward. Just as an example, but you can also change the plugin altogether. So for example, if we want to change this to something else, let's go to, I'll just pull up this Polymax synth because it's fairly easy to see. And let's get rid of this. Let's just select some sort of pad quickly. Okay, so now this is where you can see what's happening with the cutoff. So you can visually see that just following this. And if I bring this amount all the way down, and you can see that change there. Now, one thing you have to make sure is that the LFO is mapped correctly to whatever third-party plugin you're using. So if you go to these three little dots here, let's close this out of the way. Then you can see target, CC target, 74. So that's default. And in this case, that matched up with the cutoff in this synth. But if you're working a different synth that has it mapped to a different MIDI CC, then you'll need to adjust the number right here. And real quick, I'll just demonstrate the same thing for the other modulated pad. You can see how this filter is going to jump around a lot more with that envelope happening. So there you go. So I hope you found that helpful, and hopefully that gives you a jumping off place so you can use these synth session musicians yourself and kind of tweak them to make them your own. And you can use them with third-party plugins as you just saw. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. And also want to make sure to thank you for all the likes and subscribes. And lastly, if you want to improve your workflow in Logic Pro, don't forget to download my free Ultimate Logic Pro Starter Pack. This includes my Logic Pro hotkey cheat sheet, my audio recording guide, my mixing guide, my gear guide and my Logic Pro session templates. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.